me, I have the same feeling. I really and truly believe there'll never be another war. I said, the world certainly has got to have learned a lesson. There'll never be another war. Well, that was wrong. And I also believe that when I got home, things would be the way they were. They weren't. So I was disappointed a lot after the war.
Well, good morning. I'm Deb Logerquist, and I'm visiting here with Vince Sherrick, a World War II veteran. Good morning. Glad to meet you.
Good morning. Nice to meet you, too.
So, looking forward to hearing about your stories here this morning. I guess we'll start off with what branch of service you were in.
I was in the U.S. Navy, aboard aircraft carriers.
Okay, and how did you get into the Navy? Did you get called up, or did you walk down to the service board, or?
No, I'm a water person all my life. I had my own boat when I was in grammar school. And later on, as I got older, I worked on the fishing boats back east. So it was natural for me when war broke out on December 7, 41. I went to my brother and I said, Tom, I'm going to enlist in the Navy. And don't you do anything, for the simple reason that maybe the government will allow the families to have one son at home or whatever. So I enlisted right after that, and it was just natural. And I didn't realize I really thought the war would not last 4 years, but I was in for 4 years.
So then where did you go for basic training?
Basic training, I was at Newport, Rhode Island, and then I was shifted out to Chicago, where I went to Navy Pier and went there through school and graduated in the top 10% and went on to advanced school. And that was, little did I know at that time that I'd be on a base with thousands of sailors, and I was the only one with my rate.
Oh.
So I could get away with a lot of things. That was about it.
So what did they train you to do?
I specialized in aircraft propellers.
Oh, my.
And when the war ended, I had received my shots for my second tour overseas, and the war ended, and I immediately had enough points to be discharged. So the officer got a hold of me and he said, Vince, you have enough points to get out immediately. Would you mind, how about re-enlisting, and we'll give you a necktie? Make me a chief petty officer, which sounded real good. And I said, well, it's been so long since I've been home. I said, I don't think I want to do that. He said, well, why don't you think about it? So about a week later, he says, well, it's getting near time to let you go. How about you going to decide to re-enlist? And I said, no, not really. I said, I'm going to leave. So he said, well, now that we're down to this point, he said, how about re-enlisting for 60 days? So I thought about it, and I said, August, September, October, and I said, well, I'd still be home before Christmas of that year. And I said, I'll re-enlist for the 60 days, only under one condition. And the officer said, what is it, Vince? And I said that you discharge me here on the West Coast. You don't send me back east. And I said, the reason I'm asking for that, I said, because I've always wanted to hitchhike cross country. So
I guess that's the time to do it.
Yeah, so I went out on that, and that's what I did. So,
well, then, so from Chicago, where did you go? Then to get on your ship, did they send you out to San Diego? Or?
No, on the East Coast.
So you stayed on the East?
The ships were being finished on the East Coast.
Okay.
So.
And you got assigned to what?
I got assigned to the Bellawood first. That was one of the 7 ships, sister ships.
And that was a battleship?
No.
That was
these were battle cruisers converted to carriers because of the shortage. And we made the shakedown cruise to Trinidad. And when we came back from Trinidad, now that we had the experience of the shakedown cruise, they transferred me then to the Bella Wood, to the Bataan rather. The Bella Wood was the first ship. And then we made the shakedown cruise on the Bataan. We went down to Trinidad again. And then from there, we went down through the Panama Canal and joined the fleet over in Hawaii. And we had a very, I guess, a different thing, strange. We ran over a whale. Yeah.
Wow.
And it was all blood, you know, the back. I guess I'm sure we killed it. So when we got to the to Hawaii and joined the fleet, the skipper said over the loudspeaker, he said, "Well, now that we're in the fleet," he said, "MacArthur needs some help down in New Guinea." So that's where we went first, down in New Guinea.
So by what time did you make it to Hawaii? Was that in the summer then of 42 or?
No. The 42, I was in school. It had to be probably 43.
Okay,
Yeah, probably 43.
okay. So you went to New Guinea. Did you all see action?
Well, I don't know what the heck it classifies that we got two recognitions for action. See, but I don't recall what exactly when it was. The Task Force 58 that we were in was the largest fleet that ever sailed for a battle fleet, with nothing but the ships that were in the battle. We scanned almost 100 miles of ocean. That's how big it was.
Oh my goodness.
So that was then we moved around, and one of the things we did too, we made a trip up to Iwo Jima before they invaded it to see if we could, draw anything out. And we went by Iwo Jima, but the Japanese, they didn't bother us at all or attack us or anything like that. So what the heck? I was just trying to think. I'm bad with the dates. There was something happened, and we had one engagement where they were at extreme ranges, and my station was up by the island, so I could hear what was going on with the officers, and the word got out over the loudspeakers that the pilots would land any carrier that they could get on. So the strange planes would come around and land on the carrier. We had one aircraft land on our flight deck. When he hit the deck, and the arresting gear is what stops him, the hook.
The tail hook.
And his propeller stopped. He ran out of gas.
Right as he.
Right when he got.
Wow, that's kind of close.
Yeah, and what they did then, the aircraft were coming in wherever they were, and the submarines were up picking up planes that went down
In
into
the
the
ditch,
drink
uh-huh.
and that. When the airplanes came aboard, regardless of what ship they came from, took them down to the hangar deck. Pretty soon the hangar deck got full. Then, forward of the barriers, there's room on the flight deck. They let the barriers down, the planes go across, the barriers come up, and the next plane comes in. They would fill up the section forward of the barriers, and then the next plane that came down, they would pick up an airplane with the hoist and throw it in the ocean.
Oh my goodness.
Throw them away. Every time one landed, we threw one away.
Once you reached your capacity,
that was it.
Well, the men were more valuable than the planes, thank
Right.
goodness. And
then finally, I don't know, whatever happened, something happened, and we went back to Hawaii, and there was no room for us in Hawaii. So then they sent us back to the States, and that's how I came back to the States on the ship.
So during a typical day, were you on the flight deck working then?
Oh, yeah, that was,
And
my station was a flight deck, yeah.
so what, did you work on trimming the
No, just
props,
setting
or
up
just,
the arrangements for whatever procedure or engagement they were taking in. Like, if they were going to use a lot of planes, they'd have the plane set up on the flight deck with all the wings folded back. And if they weren't, sometimes they'd have both wings extended, or maybe one wing extended, depending on how many they wanted to launch and that. So,
You probably had to keep your wits about you on flight deck then.
well,
It's-
planes
coming and going and-
I had one young lad. I say young because I was in my 20s, and this young lad come up and he said, "Vince," he says, "can't you put me somewhere else?" He says, "The prop wash is throwing me down the deck, and I'm afraid I'm going to get blown overboard." So, yeah, all those type of things. So, and because the big thing was the food. The food. There was never enough food, and when we had a working party, if we were bringing food aboard for the officers, we'd steal a box or so. Yeah.
It's only
Yeah.
fair, huh?
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Now, did your ship have any trouble with Japanese submarines or
No.
any
no.
Zeros?
No, the planes come in, but we were pretty well protected by our own aircraft too. Yeah. No, we didn't have any problem with that. The only problem we had was I think we had a couple planes crash down.
On the deck? Or?
Yeah, and that put us out of commission. We needed repair work. But we did have some bad accidents, like sometimes the arresting gear wires, they would break and they'd snap out, and we had a couple of fellows were just killed by that type of thing.
Yeah, being
The
on a
wires
flight
would
deck
come around
there were a
and-
lot of hazards.
Yeah, and then of course you'd have the burial at sea. You know.
So, now you brought some pictures with
Yeah.
you here today, and is this with one of your,
Yeah, I was one of the fellows I was in charge of a group.
so, looks like your carrier had quite a few,
That was really the beginning. That was pretty close to the beginning at sea, yeah.
so did each one of these
Represent
Japanese
an
flags?
enemy plane. Yeah.
Okay, represented one plane that
Yeah.
you all had shot down, and now so you did never have to arm the guns, you were.
No, I never had a
on
gun.
the deck working
No.
with the planes.
No, we had
and-
special crews that were manning the guns, you know.
So like you said, your ship was only designed for 1,200 men, and you had a 2,000 man crew, so the food was.
Kept you thin.
Was spread out a little thin, yeah, and that shows it there. Now, I was wondering about the picture you had where, is that you with your arm in a sling?
No,
or is
that was our officer.
Oh,
And that was the day you cross the equator. You're a polywog before you cross the equator. Once you cross it, you're a shellback.
okay.
So the day before you cross, you take it out on the shellbacks aboard ship that have been there. You go around and you cut all their hair off and give them a bad time. And then the next day, they just smile when you're doing it to them because they said, wait till tomorrow
Yeah,
when they take over. So, yeah,
okay.
shellback and a polywog.
So,
This is the crew on the flight deck that handle all the planes and that. I forget how many guys I had, 30 or something
yeah,
like
that
that.
looks like a pretty good,
Yeah, and here's the shellbacks giving the polywogs a haircut the next
oh,
day.
that's what was going
Yeah,
on
that's the
there.
next day, yeah.
So you said you cruised past Iwo Jima. Were there any other major battles that your ship was involved with?
It's hard to say because It's very hard to say that, yeah, because you don't see it. You know, you can see the enemy ships or so in the distance, and the planes coming down. You know, dive bombing for the carriers and stuff like that. But I wasn't aware of, you know, what the name of the battle was or anything like that. No,
Yeah, that's a good point. You guys didn't get in close to where the battle was going on. You were providing all the support, and so one day probably seemed like the day before.
Oh, sure.
And,
yeah. You were always going. There was something going on all the time, and. One thing that was kind of interesting, at one time, we got up early in the morning, and here were supply ships for fuel. And this young officer was down there trying to get it set up. And I said to my buddy, well, there was three of us, Sherrick, Smitty, and Ski. And Smitty had been on a cruiser that was blasted out. And he had a little mental problem. Every now and then he'd kind of go off, you know. Like we'd be in a tavern having a beer or something, and one particular place he lost it and threw a couple of mugs through the mirrors and that, and they'd come out, the owner, you know, to throw us out and stuff, and I'd tell them what was wrong, and I said, we pay for it, so we paid for it, stuff like that. So they were having trouble getting the lines across, so I said to Ski was a bosun's mate. I said, Ski, why don't you tell the officer to get on the side and you take over? so the officer was really glad to have Ski take over. Ski knew what he was doing. But then they were refueling, and then we got the general quarters sign, and all they did was just chop and throw the lines over, oil spilling all over the ocean at that time. But it's amazing how fast the warnings gave you, and people reacted pretty good. So.
Did you have pretty good leadership on your ship then? Your officers were pretty good?
Yeah, they were good. Yeah, they were good. You couldn't complain. There was none of, I don't recall any of them being real petty. I recall them being young.
Yes.
Because I remember me going into a tavern and the officer behind me wasn't allowed in because he wasn't old enough.
Oh my goodness.
So,
did you have some interesting ports of call then? Did you get to see?
No. Not when we joined the fleet. No, we never stopped anywhere for recreation or anything like that. No.
So did you find, you mentioned the food was a little lean. How about the sleeping quarters? Did they have you guys stacked in there?
No, we had our own bunks. The only thing that was swung was there was a distinction between blacks and whites, and the Negro sailors. They most of them were confined to the eating quarters, and that was what they did. And they would string hammocks up at night and sleep in a hammock, but most of us had a bunk. So.
Yeah, the military was a little ahead of the rest of our country as far as starting to integrate the services, and so you did have a contingent then on your ship of the black.
Yeah, we didn't have
service
too many,
members,
but that's what they were. They were all in the mess hall. Yeah, what the heck? One of the things, naturally, trying to sneak somewhere, getting some food, I made friends with the fellas that did all the cooking. So this one fellow, I'm from back east in New York. This one sailor in the bakery, he was from New York too, Bernie. And I'd always see Bernie, and he'd always have something special for me, you know. So one day I went down to see Bernie, and I'm thinking now, because the tattooing has become so popular, So I looked down and I come in to see Bernie to get some food, and he had bandages on his elbows here. I said, Bernie, what did you do now? Because he had a tattoo on his hand. He says, Vince, wait a couple of days, come down and see me. So I waited, I go down to get some more food, and I says, Bernie, what was there? And he said, here it is, Vince. And he puts his arms out. He had hinges tattooed on the joints.
You must have had an interesting sense of humor then.
Oh, yeah. So,
Oh, did you ever have any of the bigwigs visit your ship? Any of the admirals or?
yeah, there was an admiral that, you know, kind of made his, like, welcome to the fleet type thing. But
So which admiral was?
I wouldn't.
Oh, you don't remember?
I wouldn't remember that. No.
Yes. Well, you brought along some of your medals, and then you brought along a block of wood. What's the story behind that?
That's from the flight deck, and when the ship was decommissioned, the little organization that we still have, the USS Bataan, they put the word out that you could get a piece of the flight deck. So I said, oh, sure. So I sent away, and this is a piece of the flight deck.
That's a pretty nice memento.
Yeah.
So what kind of wood do they make a flight deck out of?
I don't know what that
don't
is. You
know.
can see there's a difference.
Yes,
Yeah. I don't know.
Well, that's really great.
Yeah.
So it was actual wood and not metal, but this
No.
wasn't the surface the planes were landing on.
Yeah, they
were
land
landing
on the wood.
wood.
Yeah, and then every now and then there was a channel across, and that would be the tie downs where you could tie the. Once you get the aircraft on the flight deck in the particular setup that they required at that time for whatever operation they were going to do, they tied them down and they stay there. Then when there's a real storm, and that only happened, I think, once I know for sure. I'm not quite sure if we had it twice. But they come out with these like 6-foot tall channels, and they put them down in the metal work between the wood. And then they hit them with a sledge, and it locks them in, and they stand up, and they put that completely across the flight deck. And when the sea comes over the flight deck and the storm, it hits all these metal stanchions and disperses.
Oh,
it doesn't
okay.
go right down the deck.
And
So
knock people over.
the only thing good about the storm like that is when you go down the chow line, there isn't any. you just help yourself
Well,
to the food,
so did
you
you-
can cheat.
did you fare pretty well then, being an old salt before you
No,
got in?
I never
It
got.
didn't have the-
I never got seasick.
Yeah,
No, I didn't get
yeah,
seasick.
I wouldn't have fared well personally. So, yeah, going back to your medals here then too. So you've got this was the American campaign medal, and so that.
Do you have that list?
Well, I've got the list right here,
Oh.
and so this was for serving in World War II. That
Oh.
was the World War II campaign medal, and then
That's the Asiatic
this was
one.
the Asiatic theater. And so, did you all hear then about VE Day when the Germans surrendered? Did they give the word to you all on your ship there in the Pacific?
No, when that happened, I was back in the States.
Oh,
See,
you
and
had come back already.
Yeah, and I was getting I had received my shots, and I was getting ready for my second tour when the war ended.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I can tell you something funny
Okay.
about that. When I came back to the States, we're in Alameda, California, and it was a big naval base. So we're in there, and I had my hat on the back of my head, and I was put on report, and I had to stay aboard on the base for a whole week and memorize the rules. So naturally I had to stay on the board on the base, and the week went by, and finally I was able to go ashore on Liberty. So I asked for permission to see my commanding officer. I didn't know who he was. So I went to see him, and he said, well, what is it? I said, "Sir, I request transfer overseas." And he looked up at me and he said, "What kind of a nut are you?" He says, "You just got here from being overseas." I says, "Yes." I said, "But I'm only here a week and I'm in trouble." I says, "I don't like it."
I need to get back on ship.
I said, "I don't want to get in trouble." So he made me a one-man transfer, and he transferred me way up to Northern California. So, and at times, I was a head officer on duty at times. That's how small the base was.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I never did, no, like I say, I was ready for my second tour, but the war ended, and that was it.
well, that was fortunate. And so, let's see, this was the Victory Medal. That's what this one was. This was the Victory Medal. And then this was your Navy Service Medal, your Good Conduct.
Never got caught.
I was going to say, yeah, it sounds like you must have been smarter than some that didn't manage that. And then this pin, what did they call that? Is that the...
Honorable service.
Yes, that's a wounded duck pin. Yeah, I believe is what they call what the...
This is the first time I'm
Navy
really
people.
looking at these.
Oh, okay. And so that was what you got when you were discharged honorably from the Navy, and only the World War II Navy personnel received this wounded duck pin, and so that's a symbol right away. Somebody sees that on your hat, and they'll know you were in World War II.
Wow.
And so, well then, when did you get out of the Navy? What was that in? Did you get out in 45, or did you stay through till 46, or?
No, it had to be Christmas of 45, around that end of the year. Because in 46, I got married then.
Oh, had you met your wife then before you left home? And
I enlisted on the East Coast, so I was transferred from Newport, Rhode Island, to Chicago to go to school. I wanted to get into the quartermaster bit in the Navy, which is navigation, not in the Army. It's
it's
services.
different.
Yeah, and I wanted that very badly, but I had such an aviation background for my age that they said, "No, you're not going into the quartermaster. You're going to go to school, aviation machinist, mate, or whatever." So I went to Navy Pier in Chicago, and I went through the course there. And I met Noreen at the USO. They had the USOs then. And I met her, and that was it. I had to get back to the base. And a couple of weeks later, I said to my buddies, I said, "You know that Irish girl I met in the USO?" I said, "Gee, I'd like to see her again." So they said, "Well, where does she live?" I said, "I don't know. Do you have a phone number?" I said, "No." I said, "Well, I'm going to write her a letter." They looked and they said, "How in the hell can you write her a letter? You don't know where she lives." I said, so I wrote a letter, and I addressed the envelope, Miss Noreen Collins. Telephone company, Chicago, Illinois, and threw it.
So she was a Chicago girl, huh?
And by God, she got the letter.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
And
You wonder if that would happen these days,
Yeah.
but that's great.
And then we dated, but the funny part about the dates in those days and the kind of money that you made in the service, one date and you were broke for a month. So anyhow, we met and we corresponded. And then after the war, Noreen at that time was working for the telephone company, and she was transferred out to the West Coast for a job. And but I never saw her on the West Coast. And then after the war, when I got discharged and was hitchhiking cross country. I got as far as Chicago and I ran out of money. So Noreen had to loan me or give me some money to get home to New York. And then we decided, of course, to get married. So it all worked out okay.
So you were in Chicago going for your training?
Going to school at Navy Pier. And I went into town one day. This was when I just got there, so to speak. I went into town one day, and I was of age. And I thought, oh, I'll go in and treat myself to a glass of beer. Because I never was a beer drinker, even when I got old enough to go, when the guys and gals were able to go to a tavern and be dancing there. And for me to drink a beer, I had to have half the glass with ginger ale. I couldn't drink straight beer. I still am not a beer drinker. So anyhow, I went in to get a beer, and this man said to me, "Can I buy you a drink, sailor?" I looked at him and I said, "I'll buy my own." So you know what the next sentence out of his mouth was?
No.
"You're a New Yorker, aren't you?"
He begged you.
So anyhow, we got to meet. He didn't introduce himself. Then he invited me up to, they were having a little get-together, like a little party. And I went up and I met, so one of the men was Les Tremaine. He was in the, what was that, the little theater off Times Square? And The Shadow was the
From the radio show?
Yeah, from the radio shows.
Oh, my goodness.
So somehow or other, we took a liking to each other, and they'd invite me up. Vince, come on up. We're having a dinner, you know, and so-and-so's going to be there, and so-and-so. And he says, now, if there's anyone that we mentioned that you don't like, let us know, and we'll tell them they can't come. That's the kind of rating I had with them.
Wow.
So I think what happened, if I had stayed with them, I think they probably would have put me to work in the radio business. I don't know. I really lucked out. It was kind of nice to have friends like that. So after the war, I got home and my sister Dorothy was typing for the radio shows. And she says, "Dad, we're doing The Shadow and that." I says, "Get me a seat in the front row of the thing." And I didn't even have all civilian clothes yet, you know. So I went to the show and I sat down, and The Shadow came out with the weed of crime bears bitter fruit. Crime does not fade. He turned around, he says, "Vince Sherrick, where the hell have you been?" Here I've been
Right
in the
on
war.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty good, though, that he remembered.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, they were so good to me. And I said, what a mistake I made. I should have stayed with them because they used to talk about my voice, you know.
Yeah, well, it would have been a good radio voice.
Who knows what could have happened, but they were really good to me. And it was that way all through Chicago.
Now, did your brother end up going in the service
My
also?
brother wound up, my brother was taller than I, and he wound up as a combat medic with Patton's Army.
Oh.
And he came out, he had the mental problem. And when he came back home, they had a hospital back there in Long Island where you go up like on the top floor, then you go to the next floor down till where you hit the lower floor, you're okay.
Ready to go.
So he survived. And,
Yeah, if he was with Patton, they saw some pretty intense.
oh, yeah.
Intense fighting, and being a medic is
Yeah.
never easy.
No.
So-
I can't conceive how he survived being so
Yeah.
big. You'd think he
Yeah,
would've been
big target,
killed.
yeah. He must have learned how to keep his head down.
Yeah.
So then how did you end up in Door County?
In Door County, when I got to work, I went to work with an engineering company. I used to tell everybody, you got to get up to New England. You've got to see New England, Cape Cod and that. So one day this fellow said to me, "Vince, you're always telling people to go see New England." He says, "We got a New England here." And I said, "Where?" He said, "Door County." I said, "I'm sorry," I never heard of it. And he said, "It's in Wisconsin." but it's like Cape Cod. So then Noreen became pregnant with our daughter Beth, and I said, well, we're not going to visit my mom this year. Why don't we go and see what this Door County is like? So we checked it out and made a phone call and rented a house on Glidden Drive. So we went there, and it took 12 hours to drive up in those days from south of Chicago here. There was no roads, you know.
Yes.
So we got up to the Nightingale on the highway, made the right turn to go to the lake, and after being on the road for 12 hours, I said, my God, where is the lake? You know? So finally, after 3 miles, the lake shows up, and I take Beth out of my arms because she can't walk, she's an infant. I walk down to the water's edge at Wester's Fish Shack.
Yes.
I looked up and down the beach. Would you believe? I said, oh my God, if I could just live here someday. Would you believe that?
Wow.
And it happened.
And it happened.
Yeah. Ed Wester, I can remember, I'm sitting there talking with Ed. He always got a kick out of talking with me. And the guy would come in. Oh, Ed would look, yeah. How's the fishing? I'd look him up, he'd say, well, you can't catch him standing there. That was the way Ed treated people, you know, that he didn't like. Older couple came in. Yeah, he gets up and is hobbled, he hobbled, you know. He said, yes. She says, the fish, yes, the fish is the fish fresh? He turned around and says, you don't want any. That's how Ed was.
So like the soup Nazi.
Yeah. The original. He was really something.
So do you agree? Is this sort of the New England of the Midwest?
Oh, yeah. Yes, it's just great. I'm a water person, so I'm sold on Door County, yeah. It was really something, so we rented, and then finally our daughter Carol, the older one, she had met this little boy whose parents were renting a house. We were renting the house on the land side of Glidden Drive, and they were on the water side. So she said, why don't you buy a house? You love it so much. I said, I don't have any money. And she said, well, just think about it. And she says, if you need some money, she says, we'll loan it to you. I was shocked, you know, someone you just met. So I thought about it, and I said, she gave me the address of the person that owned the house. They were living in Michigan. So I sat down and wrote a letter to her, told her how much I loved her house. And when I got through, I said, I'd like to make a ridiculous offer for your house that I love so much. And I wrote down a number. And she wrote back and said, anyone who loved my house the way you do ought to have it. I accept your ridiculous offer. House and contents.
Oh, my goodness.
With the exception of the clock on the mantelpiece over the fireplace.
Yeah.
No one ever claimed it. So that clock has got
Still
to be a
there.
real antique. It gongs on every quarter hour. And, yeah. So that's how we got here.
Well, that's our good fortune.
Yeah, it worked out real fine. Now, my grandson just bought a house on Glidden Drive.
So we've got you all definitely
So they got-
established.
so, yeah.
Oh, well, that's great. Well, was there anything else that you had thought you might want to share with us
No, I practically
today
told you
for-
my whole afterlife here.
Well, we've really...
I've enjoyed it, and I'm kind of glad Laddie did convince me to come in because maybe somebody get a kick out of the story. I don't know.
Had you...
But the amazing thing, I always laugh at these kids today because anything they want, they get it. There's no problem. We were married. Noreen will probably kill me for saying this, but we were married 14 years, and we had amassed, I went to the bank every payday. We had amassed the enormous sum of $1,500 in 14 years. I came up on that one day, the 12-hour drive, and bought the house at the bank, made the loan, and came back and told Noreen, well, we have the house now up on the beach. And she said, how can you spend our life savings in one day? She's not the big water person that I am, you know, so to speak. And I said, Noreen, I don't know how to tell you this, but if we were to put a room on for the girls where we were living, I said, that wouldn't have changed our life. But Door County is going to change our life. So now here's our grandkids coming up, and we've all had such good times up here. You know, it's worked out fine. It was the right thing to do.
Yeah. Well, it's been very, very interesting. Enjoyed hearing your experiences being an Army brat and an Army veteran. I'm not very strong on my naval terms and things, so it was very interesting for me to find out about life on a big aircraft carrier, totally different. It's sort of a world, and it's a floating city, they say, and
you could say that, sure.
Yeah, so we're really glad that you made it through and have settled here in Door County. So with that, we'll bid adieu.
Even to this day, I have the same feeling. I really and truly believe there'll never be another war. I said, the world certainly has got to have learned a lesson. There'll never be another war. Well, that was wrong. And I also believe that when I got home, things would be the way they were. They weren't.